Here are my top 24 books that I read in 2024, in my own opinion, of course. Hi, my name is Kate and I am brand spanking new to YouTube. So if you like what you see, I'd appreciate a like or a follow or any type of interaction whatsoever. I have read a total of 84 books this year and I have ranked them all from least favorite to best favorite, and I'm going to list here the top 24 from number 24 all the way up to my favorite read of the year. Full disclosure, I do not own barely any books myself. These two are from the library, and out of the 84 books that I have read, I own 2 of them, and both of them were gifted to me, so really I've spent zero money on books this year. Mainly I get most of them from the library, so just a little heads up. Of these books, I recommend all of them. They are all rated, in my opinion, 4.5 stars or higher, and I just love them, and I would add them to your TBR now, clear your schedule, and get reading. Number 24 is The Last Flight by Julie Clark. I read this as an ebook that was available on Hoopla through my local library. This book follows 2 women who meet at an airport and are both running from something. Claire looks like she has the perfect life, but she actually is in a very abusive relationship and she's trying to run from her husband. Eva also has some trouble. She has made some bad decisions in her life, so she is running too. So at the airport, they decide last minute to switch flights and switch places so that they can get a head start of starting a new life. But then the flight that Eva gets on crashes, so Claire takes this as an opportunity to start her life over and assume Eva's identity. I love this book. This was my first Julie Clark book, and I am definitely going to be reading everything from her. I actually have another one on this list. I just love the women supporting women type novels. I loved following both storylines and seeing how they came together. It was just a great book overall. Highly recommend. Number 23 is The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. I read this as a physical book that I got from my local library. In 2017, 19-year-old Tallulah goes out on a date with her boyfriend and leaves her young son with her mom, and she never comes back. The last time she was seen was heading to a house where they were having a party near a boarding school, and she was never seen again. Then Sophie comes to the boarding school as the new headmaster's wife and finds the first clue in a year on what might have happened to Tallulah. I just really like this book because this was one of those books that kept me guessing on what was going to happen. The beginning kept me interested. The middle kind of was a little slow and I was starting to lose interest, but then the ending was satisfying, and I think that's why I rated it so high on my list. Number 22 is The Sixth Wicked Child by J.D. Barker. I read this as an audiobook that was available on Hoopla. This is the final book of the 4 Monkey Killer trilogy. I'm not going to get too much into the plot because you have to read the other 2 first, but this one was by far my favorite. You definitely need to check your trigger warnings though. It is very graphic. The 4 Monkey Killer is kind of based on those monkeys that are like, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. They were just very captivating, kept me interested, and this one was my favorite, so I did rate it 4.5 stars. Number 21 is Long Time Gone by Charlie Donnelly. I read this as an ebook that was available on Hoopla. Charlie Donnelly was my most read author this year. I just discovered him. I love so many of his books. You'll see him a couple more times on this list. This is about Dr. Sloane Hastings is doing her fellowship in forensic pathology, and she has to do a research paper. So for that assignment, she submits her DNA to an online genealogy website. She knew she was adopted, but she never really had any interest in finding her biological parents, but she does this for her research project, and she finds out she is none other than baby Charlotte. Baby Charlotte was a little baby that went missing 30 years ago along with her family, and there was no clues as to what happened to her family. And now this research led her to Sheriff Eric Stamos, who also had some personal ties to this case, so they team up and try to figure out what happened to their families. And as they get closer and closer to finding out the truth, they find out that someone is trying to stop them from finding out the truth. I love when books that aren't related by the same author feature characters from other books. I just love that connection. I get so excited. This was such a suspenseful book. I needed to know what happened. Just talking about this now actually makes me wonder why this is so far down my list, because I love this book and now I'm kind of thinking I should have rated it higher. I definitely recommend. This is one of my favorite Charlie Donnelly books. Number 20 is Finders Keepers by Stephen King. This is the second book in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. Morris Bellamy is obsessed with his favorite author, John Rothstein. And I say obsessed, I mean obsessed to the point where he goes to his house to try to find the unpublished novels because he needs to know what happens next. And when he goes there, he ends up killing the author just so he could get the cash and the unpublished notebooks. But then he actually gets arrested for an unrelated crime and he gets sent to jail for years. And then a little boy that's living in the same house as him finds the notebooks and the cash, and his family really need it. So, you know, it's all about that. Then retired detective Bill Hodges from the Mr. Mercedes novel has to team up with his partners to save the boy because once he gets out, they're going to come for him because they'll stop at nothing to read those novels. I think the reason I like this book so much is I really just like Detective Bill Hodges and Holly Gibney and Jerome Robinson. I just felt a connection to those characters. Also, being an avid reader, and I do have my own journals, I just love the idea of finding a unpublished, very important book. That would be really cool to me, and I think that's kind of why I rated this so high. I read this as an audiobook that I got from Libby. Number 19 is The Serial Killer's Daughter by Alice Hunter. I read this as an audiobook through Hoopla. A murder takes place in the small town where Jenny lives, and she's no stranger to being close to a murder case. She's actually the daughter of a known serial killer, but nobody knows this, not even her husband. She's having some spells where she wakes up and doesn't remember what's happening, and she's sleepwalking, and she kind of shows evidence that she's been out of the house, so she kind of thinks maybe she had something to do with the murder. This book held my attention for most of it, so I think that's why it's high up on my list. The plot twists were unexpected to me. This is the second book to The Serial Killer's Wife, but I don't think you need to read that one. They're kind of standalone novels. It was good though if you want to read that one too. Number 18 is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I read this as an audiobook on Libby. Jason is walking home one night from the pub to get to his wife and son when he is abducted and knocked unconscious. When he wakes up, he realizes he's not in his world. His wife is not his wife. His son was never born. Now he doesn't know what's real and what's not, or what his real world is. All he knows is he wants to get back to the world he knows. I read mostly thrillers, so this was kind of my first science fiction, but I would still call it a thriller kind of. I did love this book. You know when someone's telling a story about time travel and it's just filled with plot holes because you can't like explain away all the plot holes? This isn't time travel, but it's similar, and I thought the author did a great job at kind of explaining away any plot holes you might think of. He did a great job at this. I feel like it was kind of like a science fiction, romance, and thriller all in one, and definitely recommend even if you're a thriller girly. Number 17 is Appetite for Innocence by Lucinda Berry. I read this as an audiobook on Hoopla. A serial killer is kidnapping teenage girls and keeping them in his basement. He only takes virgins. Once he is finished with them, he disposes of them. Sarah is the only one that managed to convince him to keep her around. Ella does not wish to end up like the others, so she risks everything to escape, and Sarah escapes with her. They both end up in the hospital being questioned by the FBI, and Ella feels that Sarah is hiding something, that their story is far from over. As with all Lucinda Berry books, make sure to check your trigger warnings. I don't know why these disturbing dark stories captivate me so much. I think I'm able to read them when it's fiction. I have a hard time when it's true crime. I think this book is different than a lot of the other books because it takes place kind of after they've escaped and just kind of shows all that victims have to overcome even after they've escaped. They still need to heal a lot. Number 16 is The Passengers by John Mars. The world takes place in a world where there's self-driving cars. 8 passengers get into their separate cars at the same time. When someone hacks into the system and programs the cars to crash into each other, the hacker then streams all the passengers online, and the public has to vote of which passenger is going to be saved. The passengers are a famous TV star, a pregnant woman, a disabled war veteran, an abused wife fleeing her husband, an illegal immigrant, a husband and wife who have 2 young children, and the hacker wants the public to decide who lives and who dies. You know when you're watching a movie and it's a thriller and your heart is racing and your adrenaline is pumping? That's what this book did to me. It was shocking. It was heartbreaking. The twists and turns just threw me for a loop. Definitely recommend. This book is kind of related to The One by John Mars, but I don't think you have to read them. They're not connected in any way, and I did like The Passengers way more than The One. Number 15 is This Is Why We Lied by Karen Slaughter. I read this as a physical book from my local library. This is the latest Will Trent novel. Now, you don't need to read them in order, but I'm the type of person that needs to read things in order because I just love to see the connections between all the books. So I highly recommend you read them in order. So if you haven't read any Will Trent novels yet or Sarah Linton novels, I highly suggest you start from the beginning, but that's up to you. This one takes place in a kind of exclusive getaway where the family has owned the getaway for many generations. It's a perfect place to unplug and just reconnect with nature. When Mercy, the manager, gets murdered, Will has to cut his vacation short and get back to work. He meets someone from his childhood where he grew up at the group home and finds out that the family is not what it seems and everyone is lying. I just love the Will Trent novels. I love all the characters in them. Maybe not all of them, but I feel like I need to know what happens. So anytime a new Will Trent novel comes out, I need to get it. And this one was actually one of the better ones I've read in a while. Number 14 is The Quiet Tenant by Clemence McCallion. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I read this as an audiobook from Libby. The woman in the shed has been in that shed for the last 5 years. Her captor tells her that her name is Rachel and that the only reason she is alive is because of him. She's basically too brainwashed and weak to try to escape. Her captor's wife has recently died, so he's left being a single parent of his only daughter and has to move to a new house, meaning he has to take Rachel with him out of the shed and into the house. So he tells his daughter that she is just a tenant that needs a place to stay. Since she meets his daughter, Rachel realizes that his daughter might be the key to finally being able to escape. Rachel's not his first victim, but she has been able to convince him to keep her alive for this long. Rachel knows that he has this next victim in mind, so she knows she is on a time limit to find out how to escape before the other victim gets hurt. So I apparently have a problem and really like these kidnapping captivity plots. I think it's because the women in these stories are usually strong fighters and I admire their strength, and I think that's why I like them so much. This story included the point of view from his other victims, which I thought was really neat. It was also written in second person, which I don't see that often, and it was pretty interesting and I kind of liked that. Number 13 is I Will Find You by Harlan Coben. David lives the normal life in the suburbs with his wife and 3-year-old son when one night he wakes up and his son is dead and he's covered in his son's blood. He knows he didn't kill his son, but all the evidence is pointing that way, so he gets sentenced to life in prison. But 5 years into his sentence, his sister-in-law brings him a picture of a friend at an amusement park, and in the background is a little boy that looks exactly like his son. So he knows that he needs to escape and save his kid and clear his own name. This is another one of those heart-pumping thrillers. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. It was very fast-paced, which is always refreshing. I haven't read anything by Harlan Coben in years, so this definitely made me want to pick up more from him. Number 12 is Those Empty Eyes by Charlie Donnelly. I told you I'd have more of him on here. I read this as an ebook on Hoopla. Alexandra Quinlan is the only survivor when her family is massacred. She was able to escape the similar fate by outsmarting the murderer and kind of hiding. But since she's the only one that did survive, the police kind of assume it was her, and then the media portrays it that it was her, so she ends up being sentenced to a juvenile facility where her lawyer ends up proving that she was wrongly accused and also helps her win a defamation case against the state. But she wants to escape the media, so she changes everything about her, but she tries to help other people that are wrongly accused to prove that they are innocent as well. But while she's doing that, she finds a case where that kind of has some similarities with her own family's case, and you know, kind of comes to a head like that. I just really like the style of Charlie Donnelly's writing. I just find it very fast-paced, and I'm always wanting to read another chapter, and I think that's why I like his writing so much. I always need to know what happens next. Number 11 is The Breakdown by B.A. Paris. I read this as an audiobook on Libby. Cass is driving home from a party one night when it's pouring rain, and her husband tells her not to take the shortcut through the winding, deserted road, but she does anyway, where she happens upon a woman, but she doesn't look like she's in trouble, so she doesn't stop because she's not supposed to be down that road. But then it turns out that that woman was murdered, so she feels extreme guilt over that, and then suddenly starts to like kind of look like she's losing her mind. Like she forgot her pills or she's forgetting things, and her mom has dementia, so she thinks that she's getting dementia. Her husband thinks she's losing her mind too, but Cass thinks that someone's after her because of what she knows about the woman who was murdered. I think the twist on this one is why this is so high on my list. Is one of those mind-blowing twists. I was just so frustrated for Cass. I'm still mad when I think about it for her. Number 10 is I Wish You Were Here by Jodi Picoult. I read this as a physical book from the library. Diana is reaching all her life goals. She's going to be engaged to her boyfriend soon. She's where she wants to be as her career. And her boyfriend have a trip to the Galapagos planned, but then COVID happens and her boyfriend's a resident surgeon, so he has to stay, but he convinces her to go just to keep her safe from the virus. And she goes, but everything's closed on the island, so she kind of has to get out of her comfort zone and do things by herself, where she learns some things about herself that she didn't know if she wouldn't have gone on this trip. I think I like this book so much. It's not a thriller. It's one of the only ones that I don't have on here that's not a thriller, but it's one of the first books I've read that mentions COVID, and it just kind of brought me back to that time in our lives. We lived through a pretty significant event, and it was kind of cool going back there and just feeling those feelings again. Plus the twist in this book is like, Number 9 is The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. I read this as an ebook on Hoopla. Kat is a reporter who has been chasing a story for the last 10 years. Meg is a con artist who has revenge on something that happened in her childhood. Kat first encountered Meg when she was trying to find out more about her story, and then Meg led her to an informant that changed Kat's life forever. So they both kind of have these ulterior motives in trying to expose each other. But again, as the last Julie Clark novel that I read on here, it's just a woman supporting women book. I just love it so much. I highly recommend you check it out. It's a great thing to see. Starting now are all my 5-star reads. The ones before this I rated 4.5, but these are all my 5 stars. So starting at number 8 is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I read this as a physical book from my library. Maggie Holt is a well-known person because her father published a novel about the house that she lived in that she doesn't remember anything about. She doesn't think that the story is true, but her father insists that it was. But when her father dies, she inherits the house, so she goes back there and then kind of can't tell when her memories come flooding back, whether they're real memories or memories from the book. So it's not often that a book actually scares me. I get scared from movies, but a book, it's not often. This one scared me. I feel that Riley Sager is very good at setting the scene. Like, I can picture everything when he's reading. I sometimes find that when authors are too descriptive, that I kind of skim over it really quickly, but I feel like he does it really well, and I think that's why I rated it so high. Number 7 is Hostage by Claire McIntosh. Mina is a flight attendant for the first ever flight from London to Sydney nonstop. She's trying to focus on her job and not focus on her son and her daughter and husband, who she's left behind, when she gets a note saying that she has a choice whether to help the hijackers or her daughter will die. So she has to decide whether she saves the lives of hundreds on the plane or the one life of her daughter. Again, this was another, like, it felt like I was watching an action movie instead of reading a book. I was out of breath when I finished this book. I felt like I was doing a marathon, but I was just sitting on the couch reading. That's why I love this book so much. It just, the out of breath feeling I got when I was done. Number 6 is Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. I read this as the physical copy from the library. You need to read the actual book for this. No audiobooks, no ebooks. It has to be an actual book, or you won't get the same effect, because the author includes actual sketches, and I think that's why I liked it so much. I was scared. Like, it scared me. I couldn't sleep without the light on that night. Mallory is a recovering alcoholic where she takes a babysitting job and she feels she hit the jackpot because they're rich. She gets her own room in the guest house and she loves the kid she's taking care of and all is well. But then the kid starts drawing creepy drawings, and that's what made it scary. I thought it was really interesting how the author included the drawings in the books. I know some people hate this book and some people love it, but I am on the team that loves it. I just thought the twist was shocking. The ending was satisfying. So I just loved it all around. Number 5 was The Women by Kristen Hanna. I read this as an audiobook from Audible back when I still had Audible. Frankie grew up celebrating her family members that went to war, But when she enlists, her family does not treat her the same. I guess it's only men that are supposed to go to war, not women. It just kind of showed how women were not appreciated during the Vietnam War. And so she had to save countless lives, and the lives she couldn't save, she had to sit with them while they died, and it was just very emotional for her. I can't get into why I love this book so much without giving away the plot, but I really liked it. Let's just say that I learned some very important lessons about myself when I was reading it, and I think that's why I loved it so much. Number 4 was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I read this as a physical book from the library. Brianna has hit rock bottom. Her divorce is being finalized, and her brother needs a kidney donor, and she's up for promotion, but it looks like the new male doctor is going to get it instead of her. The male doctor is also going through a hard time. No one likes him at his new job. His ex-girlfriend is marrying his brother. So they begin by hating each other, but then they both write letters back and forth, and I don't know, a romance buds. But I don't normally like romance, but I love the way this one was done. When I do like them, I don't normally give them 5 stars, but this one I gave 5 stars. Abby just has a way of writing lovable characters, especially the men she writes about. I just love the way she portrays them as kind of vulnerable, and she's not afraid to talk about mental health. I think the letters is what made me love this book so much. Like, I have my own journals here, and I keep a daily journal for myself. So reading about them writing letters back and forth just really interested me. That would be my dream. Number 3 is Solito by Javier Zamora. I read this as an audiobook on Libby. This is the only nonfiction book on my list, just because I don't read nonfiction very much. I normally don't rate nonfiction because who am I to judge what someone else went through in life? But this one was clearly a 5 stars. It's about 9-year-old Javier who's traveling from El Salvador to the US. He's going alone, and he's 9 years old. He makes this trip with strangers. None of his family's with him. He's going to meet his father and mother in the US. He's going to be illegally going, so he has to navigate some pretty dangerous situations. And again, did I mention he's 9 years old? This took place in 1999, and I was also 9 years old in 1999. So I just couldn't imagine that. I started a new school, and I was scared about that. I can't imagine illegally entering a country by yourself at 9 years old. It was definitely eye-opening for me. Number 2 is The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer. I read this as an audiobook on Audible. This book follows 2 storylines. The first one is during Nazi-occupied Poland, and the other storyline is modern day. Alina is 15, on the verge of getting engaged and married, but then the Nazis come and invade Poland, and that changes her life forever, obviously. The other story is modern day, where Alice has 2 kids. Her youngest, Eddie, has severe autism, which makes him nonverbal, and he uses an iPad to kind of communicate. And her grandmother, Hannah, is also not doing well, and she is dying. So she's kind of trying to find out more about her grandma's life before she passes. I love World War II fiction. It's always heartbreaking, tugs at the heartstrings. It really puts things in perspective. I particularly like this story. I know a lot of people really like The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, but I kind of like this one better. I don't know if you agree, but that's my opinion. Okay, so it was really hard for me to choose my number 1. I can't even explain why it's my number 1. I believe it's because I read it at the right time. I think that's what a big part of ranking books is. If you read it at the right time, you might like it better than if you read it at a different time. So without further ado, my number 1 read of the year was The Change by Kirsten Miller. I read it as an audiobook on Libby. The Change is about 3 women who come together to solve a murder. They kind of have their own abilities. It's kind of a little bit supernatural there, but also a thriller, I guess. I don't know what you call it. They each have different gifts that they bring to help solve the murder. This book just speaks volumes about what women have to go through in life. And I read it literally while the US election was happening. And I'm not from the US, but from the outside looking in, no matter what political side you're on, you have to admit that women were going through a hard time. This book just helped me feel that anger that I was feeling. Let me read you a quote from it, because once you read this quote, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So the one girl says, "Do you want to follow the rules that have been laid out for us, or do you want to find the path that was meant for you?" When the other girl responds, "I just want to make the world a safer place for my daughter." And then the other girl responds, "What if the world as it is will never be safe for her? What if you realize you have to burn it all down?" it was just so empowering to read as a mom of a daughter, right when all this hate towards women was occurring on the internet. And I read it at the right place at the right time. Highly recommend you check it out, and that's why I picked it as #1. So that was my top 24 of 2024. Are there any you agree with or disagreed with? It's really interesting to me how differing opinions are. And it's kind of funny when someone agrees with you on one book but disagrees with you on other books. So I love discussing books. I've ranked all 84 books I've read this year, so I'm going to be posting a lot more. Like I mentioned, this is my very first YouTube, so I would appreciate any interaction that you want to give. I'm hoping to talk about a lot more books during 2025. Thanks for watching.